Here we are for another support video for your knowledge transfer workshops. These sessions or actions that you do to disseminate locally to people who would be interested what went on in the workshops that we did, the transnational workshops. So as you know, this time we had it in Rennes, a lovely place. The subject being analyzing and forecasting local labor markets. This is essentially a continuation or the flip side of the previous transnational workshop in Kaiserslautern. We were talking about making education training more responsive to the labor market, right? Well, you can't make it responsive to such a labor market if you don't know about it. So you have to have means whereby you find out about this labor market now and where it's going, the direction it's taking, right? All the presentations should be available on the online help desk. Get in touch with the lead partner if there's something wrong with that. It should be fine. When we're talking about labor markets here, we're interested in the functional labor market of your area, maybe not necessarily your municipal boundaries exactly, but where people who live in your locality would go to look for work, the distances they would travel. The problem is that this sort of level of geography often is not reflected in statistics that are available. Often it's of a larger area, or the numbers, the aggregate numbers, are too general to be really of use to you. They're not exactly what you want or need, at best perhaps indicative. Often the data is late, often 6 months old, or in some cases people were having stuff that was more than 2 years old, which is virtually useless for practical purposes. Often you're dependent upon other authorities and bodies to give it to you. You don't have the autonomy with looking for it. What we're trying to do by looking at these tools in this workshop is help administrations become independent and have access to their own data they can generate within the resources that they have. Often resources are quite limited, so they need things that are inexpensive or cheap but still effective. What do you use such data for? Well, it's pretty straightforward: for effective guidance for young people, for planning and designing curricula and training programs, for making informed investment decisions as a local authority, and so on. Contents of the workshop. Well, we kicked off with a general overview of youth policy in Europe. It's a kind of overview of the trends, the main factors. This is useful if you need to access this kind of thing and want a really quick overview. It's there for you. Anyway, it was good to set the general tone of the thing to kick us off. Then we looked at what they've got in Rennes. I'll give you a quick update on, or reminder of what the situation is in Rennes. It's a regional hub, it's capital of the region of Bretagne. It's got a lot of young people because it's where they go to study, for example. It's got a fairly good economic performance. Traditionally, it's had better than average economic and employment performance, better than the national French average. This has been eroding somewhat in a situation that might remind you a bit of what you get in Cesena. They've had a lot of large industrial closures, which has been a problem, so they've been losing jobs because of that. They've also been creating jobs with new IT developments. The problem is that while they're creating jobs, they haven't created enough at a rate to compensate these industrial jobs they've been hemorrhaging. Yeah. They've got these areas called priority areas. In English, you'd probably talk about maybe relatively deprived or disadvantaged areas. In these areas, young people have unemployment rates of 30–40%, so it's significant. The general rates are lower, but still not good. Yeah. What did we look at? We looked at the Exploratoire des Métiers. It's a kind of information center for learning about the local labor market as it is now, and the direction things are taking, so people can make decisions about what to study, where to look for work, and what have you. You'll remember what it was like. It was all very kind of techy and sort of lounge atmosphere. Then, what are the main bodies, just to get it straight? You had the Maison de l'Emploi, the employment house. It's a kind of employment center. You had this thing called the PLI, which is a local plan for insertion. It's by that, like getting people into sustained long-term work. You had this thing called the CODISPA, which supports these bodies. It's a kind of local development agency. And then you had this thing called Acti Emploi, which is a kind of program basically for helping people deal with change management. So employers and employees, as different sectors are changing, things are closing or shifting into new trends, and having to support them in dealing with this. Now we look at the tools. This is really the substance of this workshop. You have these different tools with different characteristics that we looked at. We had Oxford Economics, their skills forecasting tool. This was designed specifically for cities, so it's for people like you, it's you guys. It's freely available, it's off the rack, it's fairly easy to use, you don't have to be a very technical person. And we all met the guy who developed it. He's a young person. He's a fine example of JobTown, what we're trying to do. Now, he created the thing, and he's quite happy. If you have any questions to support you, developing it, applying it, I would urge you to take him up on it. Then we show you a thing called a web crawler. It has other synonyms as well. Why is this interesting? Well, it's a tool that crawls the internet and pulls down data. You look at job sites, public and private job sites, vacancy listings, that kind of thing, and you trawl information from there. It's interesting because this program is free. You can get this thing absolutely for free. The only thing you have to pay for is the man hours of running the program. It's relatively easy to learn. It requires some computer proficiency, but you don't have to be a programmer or something like that. It's like maybe someone had to learn Access or something. There are all kinds of YouTube videos. It's something that's doable. There's a bit of a learning curve, but it's not too bad. It's flexible. You can tweak it any way you want, tailor the questions, have multiple layers of segmentation, have just anything you want. It's entirely as you wish. It is real-time data. You get it going, program it, let it run, and then you get the data from now, from today. So that's quite good. It's also a growing trend in the sector of labor market analysis. It's the tool that, it's kind of hot. It's a coming thing, so you're only going to hear more and more about this. So at the very least, it's good that you're familiar with what it is and how it works, what it does. For example, we ran a test when we were having a look at it. We looked at Gondomar, for example, and they had all kinds of data that could be manipulated and pulled up. And so it's really worth looking at. You might actually be already using data that comes from such a tool and you don't know it. We looked at a data handling partnership, an example there in Rennes. This is interesting because it's a private initiative. It's not a public thing at all. It's this group of business people that fund it, and then they use the data and they do it in real time. They want it to be independent of the public authorities, so they feed this data into the public authorities. And they're actually somewhat critical of the government, so our friends in Rennes were quite brave to bring in this dissenting voice. Then we had someone come from Poland to talk about a statistical tool entirely about monitoring young people on the labor market. This tool was recommended to us by something called the European Network of Regional Labor Market Monitoring, which is the main reference in Europe for labor market analysis at the regional level. Okay? And this came out of an initiative that they had, and it was mostly developed in Poland, in Malpolska, which is the area of Krakow. Why is this of interest? Well, it's a tool specifically about young people, and it's got a holistic approach. So it brings together a range of different things to get an overall view. That's what it tries to do, and it's a fairly flexibly done thing. So you look at demographics, employment, family, living conditions, and so on, and you put all this together in one sort of vision. That's what it tries to do. Okay. The next tool we look at is a thing called the Occupational Barometer. This was designed by a guy in Turku, Finland, who developed it just to solve his own needs. He had a lack of data that he wanted to use. It's designed for the short term. It's to look forward, forecasting for a year. Okay? It's qualitative, and you don't need to be any kind of specialist or very technical person to use it. It's specifically meant for local labor markets, i.e. you people. Furthermore, the guy who developed it is quite happy to help you out with it, explain how it works. He's even willing to travel if you want to invite him to come to your place and work it out. Have a look at it. Okay? Then we had some presentations from Rennes. We had one that was a sector-based observatory. In this case, they were doing building and construction, public works type stuff, so it was a look at sector-based analysis, all in one area. There was a program with the Maison de l'Emploi, the employment house in Rennes, and how they're working with SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. Then there was a thing called Future West Palatinate. Now this is a tool that they presented for analyzing the labor market, and the thing about it is it's, much longer term. They were talking about 10, 15 years ahead. It's very long-term planning. They have issues with demographics and so on. They have to overcome the immigration. Now, it brings out data in all kinds of ways. They had some interesting information about, say, gender balances in different professions, different age segments, and so on. So technically, it's quite interesting. But what I would like to do is draw your attention to another aspect of it. This organization consists of 1.5 people. Yeah, you have this woman named Heckman, who's you all met, and she's a member of Kaiserslauten's local support group. And then they've got a part-time secretary, and that's it. And they managed to produce all this stuff. Well, how do they do it? Yeah. Well, that's the thing that's interesting, I find. They've got this association, and they really activate it. They get the members to do stuff. They all participate, they contribute, they produce things themselves and do it. And that's very interesting, whether it's for labor market analysis or whatever. Because I'm sure all of us would like to bottle that and use it ourselves. It's a very encouraging example, and one that really concentrates the mind and how they get this really participatory association with the memberships. Yeah. And then we had the poster session, where you all got updated on each other's local action plans, how they're developing. I suppose that's of interest to you in terms of which plans touch upon things that are of interest or relevant to yours. I put all the posters up on my Dropbox site with the web address there for you to download. You might want to think about showing one or two of the more interesting ones for you to your people as a means of provoking or getting discussion going on your own local action plan. Yeah? Then, of course, there are all the various study visits. There are lots of different ones. It's too numerous to go into now. As always, we look to hearing back from you after about how this went, not as a control thing, but because part of what we're trying to do with this particular project is learn more about how to disseminate locally all this stuff you get from a European level when people get back, and the hows and why, what works best, when to do what, with whom, and so on. So we're just trying to flesh that out a bit more, an understanding of that. Best of luck, everyone, and I look forward to hearing back from you, and we'll see all of you in the UK for the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.